Let's talk about pedal order. The order in which we connect our effect pedals can make a huge difference. Take for instance, reverb into tremolo or tremolo into reverb. It makes a big difference, right? You should absolutely be experimenting and trying effects in different orders with different combinations. That's part of the fun of using guitar pedals, is there is no right way to do it. There is, however, a sort of set of best practices that have yielded results for players over the years. Today, that's what we're going to talk about. But take everything that I'm about to say with a grain of salt. Be experimental. Try new things. I dare you. All of that out of the way, here's what works for most players and how I set up my pedal board. The first area we'll talk about is sort of the utility area. One way to think about this section is it's all of the things that make your guitar by itself sound as good as it can moving forward. So think about a compressor pedal. It's sort of going to even out your playing and make you sound a little more consistent, a little less spiky, have a little more sustain. It makes your guitar sound better. Also, an EQ is maybe going to correct something that maybe your guitar's a little too spiky, so you're going to smooth out some of that. Maybe it doesn't have a lot of mids, so you're going to give it a little bit of a bump. That's going to reshape the way your guitar itself sounds. And of course, your guitar needs to be in tune. So put that as early as you can in the chain so that you're not getting all of the other pedals influencing where your tuner is metering. Next up would be your sort of extreme guitar shapers. That's things like wah pedals, octave pedals, or even envelope filters. These type of effects typically sound better if they're before overdrive, so that's why we put them in this slot. Up next, overdrives. Now, typically I will organize these from the heaviest distortion to the lightest overdrive, and I have a specific reason for that, which I detailed in my gain stacking video. You can see there's a link up in the corner or down in the description. Not gonna go over that today, but check that out. Next, we have the amp sound. Now that is, of course, if you aren't running a actual physical amplifier. If you're running direct, there's really two schools of thought, and that's one, to have your amp sound right before all of your wet effects, or to have your amp sound last, mostly simulating what it would sound like, all of those effects going into an amp. Different schools of thought. I go back and forth on this one, and I plan to do some more experimenting. But for now, if you're running a direct pedal board, I would try both the position before your wet effects and after your overdrives, sort of right in the middle of your pedal board, or after your wet effects, very last thing in the chain. Psst, real quick, there's this button down below that looks like this. Could you click on it? That'd be great. Up next, modulation. And this is a hot topic. That's going to include things like chorus, vibrato, flangers, and tremolos, just to name a few. One of the biggest things that you have to keep in mind here is that the later an effect happens in your chain, the greater an impact that will have on your overall sound. For instance, if you want your distortion to sound very chorusy, put your chorus after. If you want your chorus to sound very distorted, put your chorus before a distortion. If you're splitting stereo, that makes a huge difference. So obviously all of your overdrive pedals are going to be mono. So you can't put a stereo pedal before those overdrive pedals, right? You need to put those after all of your mono effects, but before all of your wet effects. That's why this position makes the most sense for me. This is the spot where I start to split stereo, and then it hits my other effects that are also stereo. Again, this is just a set of guidelines. You really should experiment and figure out what works for you, but I like modulation in this slot. The next one is delay. This one doesn't need a lot of explaining. Most people generally put delay in this location. Lastly, reverb. Now we put reverb last because reverb is really the sound of the space that your guitar lives in. So is your guitar living in a small room, or is it living inside a massive cavern? So throughout this video, you've got to see my pedal board, but you haven't really got to hear it. I go through the whole thing in this video. I'll also put a link in the description. You can check it out there. While you're down there, maybe drop me a comment. Let me know, is this the way that you set up your pedal board, or do you do something different? I'd really appreciate it. Until next time, keep getting better.